Holden held back, pushing Naomi in and then Alex. The last Marine, the one Kelly had called Dookie, fired his rifle on full auto at some target around the corner from Holden. When the weapon ran dry, the Marine dropped to one knee and ejected the clip in the same motion. Almost faster than Holden could
Looks like someone had a happy birthday over here.
He pulled a magazine from his harness and slapped it into his weapon. He was firing again less than 2 seconds after he'd run out. Naomi yelled at Holden to get into the elevator shaft, and then a vice-like hand grabbed his shoulder, yanked him off his magnetic grip on the floor, and hurled him through the open elevator doors. "Get killed when I'm not babysitting," Lieutenant Kelly barked. They shoved off the walls of the elevator shaft and flew down the long tunnel toward the aft of the ship. Holden kept looking back at the open door, receding into the distance behind them. "Dookie isn't following us," he said. "He's covering our exit," Kelly replied. "So we better get away," Gomez added.
Dead deer.
"Make it mean something."
Dead deer?
Kelly, at the head of the group, grabbed at a
Just got
rung
run
on
over
the
or
wall
something.
of the shaft and came to a
I
jerking
fell
stop.
down the mountainside.
Everyone else followed suit. "Here's our exit. Gomez, go check it out," Kelly said. "Holden, here's the plan. We'll be taking one of the Corvettes from the hangar bay." That made sense to Holden. The Corvette class was a light frigate, a fleet escort vessel. It was the smallest naval ship equipped with an Epstein drive. It would be fast enough to travel anywhere in the system and outrun most threats. Its secondary role was as a torpedo bomber, so it would also have teeth. Holden nodded inside his helmet at Kelly, then gestured for him to continue. Kelly waited until Gomez had finished opening the elevator doors and gone into the hangar bay. "Okay, I've got the key card and activation code to get us inside and the ship fired up. I'll be heading straight for it, so all of you stick right on my ass. Make sure your boot mags are off. We're going to push off the wall and fly to it, so aim straight or you miss your ride. Everyone with me?" Affirmative replies all around. "Outstanding. Gomez, what's it look like out there?" "Trouble, LT. Half a dozen boarders looking over the ships in the hangar. Powered armor, zero-G maneuvering packs, and heavy weapons. Loaded for bear," Gomez whispered back. People wrapped in a spacesuit and surrounded by vacuum. Gomez could have been lighting fireworks inside his armor and no one would have heard it. But he whispered. "We'll run for the ship and shoot our way through," Kelly said. "Gomez, I'm bringing the civvies in 10 seconds. You're covering fire. Shoot and displace. Try and make them think you're a small platoon."
Some people over here are still not putting
"You
on
calling me
masks.
small, sir?"
See, you used to be quiet.
Gomez said. 6 dead assholes coming up." Holden,
I'll
Amos,
visit the
Alex,
Indians,
and
though.
Naomi followed Kelly out of the elevator shaft and into the hangar bay, and stopped behind a stack of military green crates. Holden peeked over them, spotting the boarders immediately. They were in 2 groups of 3 near the night. One group walking on top of it, and the other on the deck below it. Their armor was flat black. Holden hadn't seen the design before. Kelly pointed at them and looked at Holden. Holden nodded back. Kelly pointed across the hangar at a squat black frigate about 25 meters away, halfway between them and the night. He held up his left hand and began counting down from 5 on his fingers. At 2, the room strobed like a disco. Gomez opening fire from a position 10 meters from their own. The first barrage hit 2 of the boarders on top of the night and hurled them spinning off. A heartbeat later, a second burst was fired 5 meters from where Holden had seen the first. He would have sworn it was 2 different men. Kelly folded up the last finger on his hand, planted his feet on the wall, and pushed off toward their Corvette. Holden waited for Alex, Amos, and Naomi, then shoved off last. By the time he was in motion, Gomez was firing from a new location. One of the boarders on the deck pointed pointed a large weapon toward the muzzle flash from Gomez's gun. Gomez, and the crate he'd been taking cover behind, disappeared in fire and shrapnel. They were halfway to the ship, and Holden was starting to think they might make it. Disappeared in a flash of light. Chapter 14. Miller. The Xinglong died stupid. Afterward, everyone knew she was one of thousands of small-time rock-hopping prospector ships. The belt was lousy with them. 5 or 6 family operations that had scraped together enough for a down payment and set up operations. When it happened, they'd been 3 payments behind, and their bank, Consolidated Holdings and Investments, had put a lien on the ship. Which, common wisdom had it, was why they had disabled her transponder. Just honest folks with a rust bucket to call their own, trying to keep flying. If you were going to make a poster of the Belter's dream, it would have been the Xinglong. The Scipio Africanus, a patrol destroyer, was due to head back down toward Mars at the end of its 2-year tour of the belt. They both headed for a captured cometary body a few 100,000 kilometers from Chiron to top off their water. When the prospecting ship first came in range, the Scipio saw a fast-moving ship running dark and headed more or less in their direction. The official Martian press releases all said that the Scipio had tried repeatedly to hail her. The OPA pirate casts all said it was crap, and that no listening station in the belt had heard anything like that. Everyone agreed that the Scipio had opened its point defense cannons and turned the prospecting ship into glowing slag. The reaction had been as predictable as elementary physics. The Martians were diverting another couple dozen ships to help maintain order. The OPA's shriller talking heads called for open war, and fewer of the independent sites and casts were disagreeing with them. The great, implacable clockwork of war ticked one step closer to open fighting. And someone on Ceres had put a Martian-born citizen named Enrique dos Santos through 8 or 9 hours of torture and nailed the remains to a wall near Sector 11's water reclamation works. They identified him by the terminal that had been left on the floor along with a man's wedding ring and a thin faux leather wallet with his credit access data and 30,000 Europa script new yen. The dead Martian had been affixed to the wall with a single-charge prospector spike. 5 hours afterward, the air recyclers were still laboring to get the acid smell out. The forensics team had taken their samples. They were about ready to cut the poor bastard down. It always surprised Miller how peaceful dead people looked. However god-awful the circumstances, the slack calm that came at the end looked like sleep. It made him wonder if, when his turn came, he'd actually feel that last relaxation. "Surveillance cameras?" he said. "Been out for 3 days," his new partner said. "Kids busted them." Octavia Muss was originally from Crimes Against Persons, back before Star Helix split violence up into smaller specialties. From there, she'd been on the rape squad. Then a couple of months of crimes against children. If the woman still had a soul, it had been pressed thin enough to see through. Her eyes never registered anything more than mild surprise. "You know which kids?" "Some punks from upstairs," she said. "Booked, fined, released into the wild." "Know that these cameras were busted? Someone in maintenance? Or a cop?" Muss smacked her lips and shrugged. 3 generations in the belt. Jim Holden, the earther from the Canterbury. Mars should be picking his people up around now, and I need to petition for the debriefing transcripts. "You have a case that goes back to the Canterbury?" "Yeah," he said. Seems like I do.
Looks like someone damaged the guardrail.
Tell me, she said. Tell me now. It's the side job. Julie Mao. I've been looking into it. I saw your report. So you know she's associated with the OPA. From what I've found, it looks like she was on a freighter that was doing courier runs for them. You have proof of that? I have an OPA guy that said as much. On the record? No, Miller said. It was informal. And it tied into the Martian Navy killing the Canterbury how? She was on the Scopuli, Miller said. It was used as bait to stop the Canterbury. The thing is, you look at the broadcasts Holden makes, he talks about finding it with a Mars Navy beacon and no crew. And you think there's something in there that'll help you. Won't know until I see it, Miller said. But if Julie wasn't on that freighter, then someone had to take her off. Shadid's smile didn't reach her eyes. And you would like to ask the Martian Navy to please hand over... whatever they got from Holden. If he saw something on that boat, something that'll give us an idea what happened to Julie and the other... You aren't thinking this through, Shadid said. The Mars Navy killed the Canterbury. They did it to provoke a reaction from the belt so they'd have an excuse to roll in and take us over. The only reason next. And the
okay, we entered
Mao
the snow
retrieval
biome.
is our first priority.
The snow is up here, Cindy.
I'm not saying it is, Miller said, chagrined to hear the
Snow.
defensiveness in his voice.
Oh.
Yeah, you don't have to
We have a
yell.
board out
Yeah,
there
sure.
that's full and getting fuller.
It's just a little bit of
Our
snow.
first
not that
priorities
much.
are safety and continuity
And
of
plus, it's all
services.
melting.
I think the
so.
If
more
what
we
you're
climb
doing
up, the
isn't
more snow
directly
we'll
related
see.
to that, there are
No,
better
Shay, I
things
don't
for you to be
think so.
doing.
That's all melting.
This war isn't our job, Shadid said. Our job is series. Get me a final report on Juliet Mao.
And
I'll
see,
send
plus
it
we're
through
almost at the
channels.
top, so there's probably
We've done what we
more.
could. I don't think I do, Shadid said. We've done what we could. Now stop being a pussy, get your ass out there and catch bad guys. Detective. Yes, Captain, Miller said. Muss was sitting at Miller's desk when he got back to it. A cup in her hand that was either strong tea or weak coffee. She nodded toward his desktop monitor. On it, 3 belters, 2 men and 1 woman, were coming out of a warehouse door, an orange plastic shipping container carried between them. Miller raised his eyebrows. Employed by an independent gas hauling company. Nitrogen, oxygen, basic atmospherics, nothing exotic. Looks like they had the poor bastard in one of the company warehouses. I've sent forensics over to see if we can get any blood spatters for confirmation. Good work, Miller said. Muss shrugged. Adequate work, she seemed to say. Where are the perps? Miller asked. Shipped out yesterday, she said. Flight plan logs them as headed for Io. Io. Earth-Mars Coalition Central, Muss said. Want to put any money on whether they actually show up there? Sure, Miller said. I'll lay you 50 that they don't. Muss actually laughed. I've put them on the alert system, she said. Any place they land, the locals will have a heads up and a tracking number for the Dos Santos thing. So, case closed, Miller said. Chalk another one up for the good guys, Muss agreed. The rest of the day was hectic. 3 assaults, 2 of them overtly political and 1 domestic. Muss and Miller cleared all 3 from the board before the end of shift. There would be more by tomorrow. After he clocked out, Miller stopped at a food cart near one of the tube stations for a bowl of fat rice and textured protein that approximated teriyaki chicken. All around him on the tube, normal citizens of Ceres read their news feeds and listened to music. A young couple, half a car up from him, leaned close to each other, murmuring and giggling. They might have been 16, 17. He saw the boy's wrist snake up under the girl's shirt. She didn't protest. An old woman directly across from Miller slept, her head lolling against the wall of the car, her snores almost delicate. These people were what it was all about, Miller told himself. Normal people, living small lives in a bubble of rock, surrounded by a hard vacuum. If they let the station turn into a riot zone, let order fail, all these lives would get turned into kibble like a kitten in a meat grinder. Making sure it didn't happen was for people like him. Was for people like him, Mus, even Shadid. So, a small voice said in the back of his mind, why isn't it your job to stop Mars from dropping a nuke and cracking Sirius like an egg? What's the bigger threat to that guy standing over there? A few unlicensed whores? Or a belt at war with Mars? What was the harm that could come from knowing what happened?
Look at those trees.
But of course,
Most of them are growing
he
new.
knew the answer to that.
Most of them are pretty much
He
dead.
couldn't judge how dangerous the truth was until he knew it, which was itself a fine reason.
Summer Haven.
The OPA man, Anderson Dawes, was sitting on a cloth folding chair outside Miller's hole reading a book. It was a real book. Onion skin pages bound in what might have been actual leather. Miller had seen pictures of them before. The idea of that much weight for a single megabyte of data struck him as decadent. I was hoping we could talk. Miller was glad, as they went inside together, that he'd cleaned up a little. All the beer bottles had gone to the recycler. The tables and cabinets were dusted. The cushions on the chairs had all been mended or replaced. As Dawes took his seat, Miller realized he'd done the housework in anticipation of his meeting. He hadn't realized it until now. Dawes put his book on the table, dug in his jacket pocket, and slid a thin black film drive across the table. Miller picked it up. What am I going to see on this? He asked. Nothing you can't confirm in the records, Dawes answered. Anything fabricated? Yes, Dawes said. His grin did nothing to improve his appearance. But not by us. You asked about the police riot gear. It was signed for by a Sergeant Pauline Trikoluski for transfer to Special Services Unit 23. Special Services 23? Yes, Dawes said. It doesn't exist. Nor does Trikoluski. The equipment was all boxed up, signed for, and delivered to a dock. The freighter in the berth at the time was registered to the Cooperação do Gato Preto. Black Cat? You know them? Import-export, same as everyone else, Miller said with a shrug. We investigated them as a possible front for the local Grega. Never tied them down, though.
Stop here?
You were right.
Well, we can go further. The gate's open.
Not my job,
I know.
Dawes
I'm
said.
not sure how far we can go.
But this might interest
You guys want to go right on the...
Automated docking logs for the ship.
Hey, we're allowed to
when
go up
she
there
left
now,
here
I think.
and when she arrived on
We have
Ganymede.
masks.
She's 3 tons lighter, Dawes said. Both of them. The riot gear was taken off the station by local organized crime. There aren't records to support it, but I think it's safe to assume that they also shipped out the personnel to use that gear. Where to? Dawes lifted his hands. Miller nodded. They were off station. Case closed. Another one for the good guys.
Is this from the
Damn.
fire?
I'm starting to twitch a
I've
little bit
kept my part of our bargain.
because I'm getting
Dawes said.
scared.
You want to stop here?
You asked for information.
Yeah.
I've gotten it. Now,
This got burned in the
are
fire
you going
this
to keep
summer?
your end?
Yes.
Wow.
Drop the Mao
Those trees have
investigation.
died.
Miller said.